And I believe it should be recording. Yep. Jon, if you want to take it away, go ahead.
Okay. If I press all the right buttons, you should be able to see it here in a second.
Right on.
All right. Can everybody see the presentation?
Yes, sir.
All right, perfect. So today, going over entrepreneurship for veterans, as Alan mentioned, I used the Eagle Group probably about a year ago for some connections, but I ended up going a little bit different direction and being an entrepreneur. And tonight I just want to share kind of my military experience and how that applies to whether you're thinking about starting a business or you already have a business and what that looks like. And then I would say, you know, especially if you're thinking about that process, the resources that are both local and national that I've used and had really good luck with, and kind of the different ways that those resources can help you specifically as a veteran. So the obligatory background for me, as an Air Force officer, I'm actually still in the reserves here in the Twin Cities. I launched my e-commerce brand probably about 3 years ago called Tokelau Coffee. And have run that for the last 3 years. And then something that's kind of just developed over the last 6 months is because that brand was very Amazon focused and e-commerce focused, as COVID hit, the silver lining was that we were kind of prepared for that. And then the kind of the knock-on effect was that a lot of the other businesses that I network with and that have helped me, and I've also helped them over the last few years as I've worked on my brand, we're very focused towards, you know, stores and that type of stuff, and really kind of the traditional brick and mortar. And so because, you know, our brand was so focused more digitally, they started asking me a lot of questions and did some presentations on, okay, here's how you kind of get started on Amazon. Here's how you do digital marketing, you know, kind of get the ball rolling and that type of stuff for your brand when you're a smaller brand. And because of that, you know, I had a few people that said, you know, they really liked the information and it sounded really good, but they were like, I just don't have the time or the expertise to do it. Jon, can you do it for me? And so out of that, for about the last 6 months, one of the other projects I've been doing is started a marketing agency called First North Marketing that pretty much focuses on e-commerce, helping brands and specifically product-based brands build an audience, and then also helping them leverage Amazon as a platform. And as I go through this, feel free to interrupt me if you've got questions. The next piece, just kind of how this connects to my military experiences. One of the first things is Separate Gumby. You know, I talked about it a second ago. If you would have asked me 3 years ago, you know, if I was interested in starting a marketing agency, I would have told you heck no. But because the demand was there and people were interested in it, and I had something to offer where I could help people, I took advantage of that opportunity. If you're not familiar with Separate Gumby, that's kind of the tongue-in-cheek that we use in the Air Force to basically say that you have to be flexible. And as somebody in the military, I'm sure that, you know, many of us have gone through situations where you show up somewhere for a deployment or whatever it happens to be, and things aren't exactly as described, and you kind of have to be flexible with the situation in order to accomplish the mission. And that's definitely been a huge asset to me as I work on my own brand, and also now helping other brands as well, whether it be on Amazon or through their own digital marketing channels. The second piece is no plan survives first contact. This is definitely true in the military, but it's also true in the business world as well, where you have to be, you know, flexible and adaptable once that plan is in motion, that there's going to be changes. Things aren't always going to work the way that they were intended. The next one is discipline. And so this is something that is kind of ingrained in the military, but is probably not seen quite as much or not experienced as much in the civilian world, is especially if you're interested in starting your own business, or if you already have your own business, there's not a boss over you on a day-to-day basis that's telling you what to get done and what priorities to have and that type of stuff. So you have to have that discipline. And I think the military, that experience was really helpful for me to understand, to have that discipline, to focus on the areas that really matter. Problem solving, obviously, if you're, you know, we run into situations all the time where you have to accomplish the mission no matter what your resources are. And so you have to be able to problem solve in order to do that. And then the last one, And I know it sounds not very exciting, but I can tell you that there's a lot of dividends that are paid by it, which is SOPs, or standard operating procedures. My eyes were really opened after 15 years in the military. I thought every organization in the military and civilian world had, really good standard operating procedures, but now working with a lot of small businesses, what I've learned is that is a completely foreign concept for people that don't come from a military background. And so they really struggle with, how do I make, whether it's an operational process or a marketing process or whatever it happens to be, how do I make that process repeatable and made sure it gets done the right way every time. And so using that military experience of understanding what an SOP looks like, how to build an SOP, and how to make sure that that SOP is properly implemented has been a huge benefit for me, not only in my own business, but also I would say that's probably the biggest thing. Officially on the title, I do marketing, but I also do a lot of coaching. And I would say one of the biggest things that I'm helping businesses right now with is developing those standard operating procedures so that way they can have a consistent process. The other one that I really want to foot stomp here is leading people. So if you've been an NCO or an officer, the military really does a great job of giving us training on how to lead and manage people that you don't see in the civilian world. I'm working with one client in particular who just hasn't had that experience before. And so he's really struggling with, how do I provide feedback to people on a consistent basis? What is mentoring and the follow-up process looks like? I grew up with kind of a little bit of the wall-to-wall counseling. Obviously, this is a softer, gentler approach than that, but a lot of the principles still do apply. And then the last thing that I'll kind of touch on there is do more with less. We heard this all the time in the military of do more with less. And, it just really teaches you to be creative with your solutions and define what really works. And that definitely applies when you're working either on your own business or you're helping other small businesses figure out how to get the most out of their limited resources. So the next piece, I'm just going to share kind of my experiences over the last 3 years of things that I've learned from the business side of things. Again, if there's questions or whatever, feel free. We'll definitely cover those at the end. The first thing is make sure that you have your personal finances in order. I found it helpful to have 6 to 12 months of savings for your monthly bills and that type of stuff. I have a family, 2 kids, and that type of stuff. So with entrepreneurship and owning your own business, things can change for the better or for the worse very fast. So you want to make sure that you have your own house in order, because now you're basically managing not only your own finances, but also balancing that of the business as well. Test your idea with an MVP, which stands for minimum viable product, or service, depending on what you're looking after. I can't emphasize this enough. I think almost every idea can be tested out there with a minimum viable solution of some kind before you start doing a lot of investing and putting a lot of money into it. And I see this is probably the most common mistake that I see people make, and kind of connections and people that I'm friends with, and also mistakes that I've made before, where you think something's going to go really well, you don't test it out, and you end up burning a lot of money. Start lean and do more of what works. So this is, there's always, whether you're starting a business and especially once you're in a business, there's always 12 different ways and different directions that you can go. But really focusing on what's working right now, how do you optimize that? And then, spending 20% of your time on testing out new ideas and different, sales channels and all that kind of stuff. I talk quite a bit about the SOPs piece of it, but once you've got something that's kind of working, you've got those first few sales and you've got a process, a little bit of a process, that's when you can start creating those SOPs or standard operating procedures, because they save you a ton of time. And probably the most important piece of those SOPs is, at some point, you don't want to be the person doing everything in your business. So how do you hand that off to somebody else? And that's where those SOPs are critical. I'm in a mastermind group, and this is something that we talk about on a regular basis, and that I've been helped a few people with, because again, that military experience teaches us how to create those SOPs, what those SOPs should look like, how to ensure that they're actually being followed. And that's something that is a skill that's not practiced as much or as well known in the civilian world. And then the last thing is, at some point you want to solely hire or outsource certain portions of the business that maybe you're not the most talented at, or that are just taking up a lot of your time, so you can really focus on growing and scaling. And the last piece, and this is probably the most important piece, is these are resources that I've used over the last few years and that I found really helpful. The first one on the top left is Bunker Labs. They actually have 3 kind of different levels. So they have a very in-depth online course if you're thinking about starting a business and you want help putting together an actionable business plan that walks you through it just step by step. And that's specifically for veterans. They're a veteran organization that helps entrepreneurs. So that's the first resource they offer. Locally, they have a program called Veterans in Residence, where it's well, it was an in-person program. I think right now they're doing most of it virtually. But what they do is you have a cohort. So you have a group of about 10 other people that, it's usually that phase once you've made a few sales and you're looking at scaling that business. They have a cohort of about 10 people that are all in that same phase. And they get together on a weekly basis and they go over a different topic, and they have an expert come in. And then probably the most important piece out of that is they have a handful of mentors that have been through this process, are well connected in the business community here in the Twin Cities. So they can really help you grow your business once you kind of have gone through that ideation stage. And then finally, for the businesses, once you get to that kind of, 6-7 figures a year category, they have something called CEO Circle, which is local businesses here in the Twin Cities that are usually veteran owned, and they get together on a regular basis. And these are people that, they have a decent sized business, but like everybody else, they've got challenges in their business. And so it's a great resource where it brings together different ideas and different experiences. They're all veterans. It's a very close group. So you have that camaraderie, and they help continue to push that business forward and find connections and networking, just like you would if you were doing something like a job search. The next one, kind of in the middle on the top, is VBOC, which is the Veteran Business Outreach Center. You'll notice that there's a couple of different resources that are from the Small Business Administration. This one is particular for veterans, so they're very tied into the different veteran programs that are out there, whether they be through the Small Business Administration or other organizations as well. I actually used them to get tied into a local group that, long story short, I ended up getting a $10,000 grant for my business through them. So there's a lot of opportunities out there for veterans, but you do have to connect with some of those resources in order to just be aware of them and to take advantage of them. The far right is something a little bit different. If you're a business that's looking at working with, contracting or a lot of different things with Fortune 500 companies or even the federal government, what that is that's a certification for veteran-owned and disabled veteran businesses. So that's, as far as I know, the only national certification that's recognized by the VA and a lot of other Fortune 500s. There is a process that takes, I think, somewhere between 3 and 6 months with that, and there is some cost involved. But a lot of these Fortune 500 companies, along with government contracts, have a certain portion set aside specifically for veterans. And I haven't particularly used this program, but from what I've heard from a few different people is that those quotas that are being set in a lot of cases are not being met because there's not enough veteran-owned businesses that are certified in order to take advantage of those. So for people that offer the right services, usually, I'll be honest with you, a lot of it's, construction and that type of stuff. There is a lot of opportunity in that area for certain types of businesses. Looking at the bottom left, Boots to Business. This is a program that if you went through TAPS and that type of stuff, you probably heard of before. They do have a pretty good program if you're in the idea stage and you're looking for kind of a process to go through. Boots to Business has some pretty good information. And then the last one on the bottom center there is the Small Business Development Center. It's not specifically targeted towards veterans, but they do have a lot of veteran outreach, and they're at least locally, they're very, very good, and they're very helpful towards veteran-owned businesses. And that organization, really what their specialty is that they have people on staff that are really good at solving more complex specific problems. So for example, if you're trying to figure out the best way to do your accounting for your business, or to switch from accrual or from cash accounting to accrual accounting. They have a pool of resources in order to point you to the right person. In a lot of cases, for veterans, they're able to find you either free or very reduced cost on very capable resources here within the Twin Cities. And then the last thing that I'll put on there is just my email. And, I'm very thankful and very appreciative of what the Eagle Group does, and Alan and Michael and a lot of other people. So if you're interested in starting a business, or if you have a business and you're just, you're working on a problem, or you're looking to somebody to complain to, because that's a part of being a business owner too, is that sometimes you're just looking for someone to bounce ideas off of. I've got my email address there. Feel free to email me. I'm happy to help anybody else in this group. And with that, I'll open up to any questions.
Did the Air Force really use wall-to-wall counseling?
So I would say I experienced something similar in the Air Force, but that was probably a very unique experience.
Hey, John, when you're coming out and transitioning, did you plan on doing entrepreneurship, or is that something that you kind of fell into on your way out?
It's something that I really wanted to do. So my e-commerce business, now they have a fancy term for it called third shift entrepreneur. And that just means that you work on it nights and weekends. So I did that for a little over a year before I got out of doing reserve stuff full time.
Did you use Bunker Labs on their in-depth program?
Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Did you use Bunker Labs on their in-depth program?
Yeah, so I was part of the Veterans in Residence program. So once I got my business kind of rolling a little bit, and I had my first couple of customers, I used that Veterans in Residence program to scale it.
Thanks.
John, this is Alan. First, let me say that was a wonderful presentation. It was like a World War tour. So thank you. One of the things you mentioned was having 6 to 12 months of funding.
Mm-hmm.
But you also mentioned about a minimum viable product. And it seems to me like if it's minimum enough, you might be able to do both a day job and, a startup if you're working it, or like if you're doing a virtual Amazon type thing or something.
Yeah. So there's some strategies in order to reduce risk. And I would say the biggest thing, and you hit the nail on the head, Alan, is testing that idea out with nights and weekends. The 6 to 12 months is really when you're ready to make that leap.
Okay.
In full time. And I make that recommendation is because, even with my own experiences, things can go really great. And then, something happens and all of a sudden you don't have revenue for a month or two.
Like COVID.
Exactly. But it could also be non-COVID related. It could be, Amazon decides to ban your account because they think you did something that you didn't do. And, life happens. So it's always good to have a backup plan.
You also mentioned CEO roundtables. Was that with Bunker Labs? I wasn't quite clear which enterprise did that.
Yeah, so Bunker Labs has 3 different levels. The CEO roundtable, which is really for established businesses that are probably doing, I would say, 6 to 7 figures a year. So they've got something rolling. And then for businesses that are they've got their first couple of customers and they're looking at scaling, you've got the Veterans in Residence program. And that is, it runs, I think it currently runs 3 months right now. And that's, you're working with a cohort of veterans that also own businesses, and you guys are all kind of working through the same problems at the same time. And then they also have that mentorship piece. And then the starting stage is, I forget, I think they call it something launch. I forget off the top of my head, but that's a completely online training program. And really to get you through the business, a very good actionable business plan. And so anybody can do that, the first step at any time.
So you're doing business coaching. Is that general business coaching or specifically on launching an Amazon business?
So it's around marketing, and it's the two things that I focus on are leveraging Amazon, because a lot of the businesses that I work with were doing very well in stores, and then like you said, COVID happened. So now they're like, how do I get on the Amazon? And honestly, usually when they come to me, they put a product on Amazon and they go, I'm not getting any sales. Why? And so we have to go. I help them leverage that process, and then it's how do I maximize the current customer base that I have, and grow that audience. And so those are kind of the three things that I really focus on with the marketing agency. And it's because those are the three things that I've had to tackle over the last 3 years with my own e-commerce business.
John, I have a question for you. Do you have a staff?
Do I have a staff?
Yes, sir.
So right now I have a handful of contractors that I use for different things. So probably the most active one is I do have a writer that works as a contractor almost full time for me. And that's a great example of using the skills that I learned in the military, because it's a process of, okay, giving them an SOP, so guidelines on what to write on, because we do a lot of SEO content. And then, the first month or so, it was, they would give me a product, I'd do the edits, I'd show them the edits, and then I'd show them, what does a good finalized product, and their writing has improved significantly over the last month or so. And it's just, it's knowing how to coach someone through that process like you would with, in my case, a basic airman or a private or somebody else who comes into the organization and maybe they've got, a couple of skills, but they really need to get a few more tools in that toolbox, and how do you help them with that?
The reason I was asking is I actually have a veteran on my caseload, and she's looking to do a office type job that would be telecommuting, but part-time.
Okay.
And she lives out in the Waconia area, but telecommuting, it doesn't matter where she lives. So I'm just trying to find her some jobs. I'm the senior veterans employment rep with the state of Minnesota.
Okay.
So I'm doing every angle I can.
Absolutely. And I love to connect because, yeah, we're definitely, third quarter was pretty busy, and fourth quarter is going to be extremely busy.
Okay. I've already sent you an email asking for the resources you brought up, because I think some of the other veterans on my caseload could use some of those. Thank you.
Okay.
So after this presentation, how many of you are now going to jump feet first into entrepreneurship? Quick show of hands. No, good deal. Well, are there other questions that anybody wants to ask? I think those are great questions and a great presentation, John.
Thank you.
Let's see, Mike Pavic, do you want to stop the recording at this point?